Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in because we do have a lot of questions that I want to make sure that we cover. So to start off with, let me do a little introduction. I am Ellana Davis, your host and Meetup organizer. I work with e-commerce shops to remove friction from the buying process. And my focus is really on what I call rescuing websites and making them more effective in attracting more visitors, providing better SEO, and increasing conversion rates, all at a fraction of the cost of a full redesign. Here is a quick look at our agenda for today. Like I said, it is going to be recorded. So assuming everything works, we'll be sharing the video either later today or tomorrow. But we do have a lot of questions, so I want to keep moving forward in here. A quick shout out to our sponsors. Jason LD for SEO transforms your SEO with rich results, a program that allows you to show search enhancements such as review stars, price, and availability in Google Search, Bing, and Pinterest. And then, of course, we all know Shopify. Shopify is more than just an e-commerce solution to sell anywhere to anyone with Shopify's e-commerce platform and point of sale features. I'm going to share their links in the chat for you just in case. All right. We have a couple of events coming up. Today's session is actually going to wrap up the year as we head into the holiday season. So we'll be back in January with some live store feedback, sort of like a teardown that many call a teardown, but I don't like that word. I think it's not exactly positive. So I call them more like a website review. So keep an eye out for that email in the coming months. If you do have topics that you would like to see or areas that you want us to explore, please let me know in the feedback request that you'll be receiving in the next day or so. It also helps me to know what's working well or not so that we can continue to provide a valuable resource for you. All right, and without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. We have Chris Daria, Carlos Barrero. See, I told you I shouldn't have done it because I was going to butcher it. And Ellana Benabou, not to be confused with me, Ellana, so there might be some back and forth of who we're actually talking to. Unfortunately, Val Geisler did plan to be here, but she had availability change at the last minute. So perhaps each of you can actually give a quick introduction, if you don't mind, as to who you are, what you do, before we get into the questions. Chris, can you jump us off?
Yes, of course. Hey, everyone. It's really nice being here. I'm Chris. I'm based in Montreal, Canada. I'm an email marketing strategist. I work mainly with e-commerce brands who use Klaviyo, and my focus is really working with helping them set up their email automations in a day and improving their overall email strategies. And I work mainly with a lot of, mama entrepreneurs, busy moms who own their own online business, online stores, and a lot of them just have a lot of things to balance, with work, building a business, kids. And so if I can help them make more money by making their lives easier with email automations, that's, I'm all for it. So that's what I'm all about. So yeah, that's a bit of me.
Thanks. Ellana, how about you?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Ellana Benabou. I am a senior customer success manager at Klaviyo. I work with our mid-market customers, so brands who kind of fall in that a little bit smaller than enterprise, but work like an enterprise brand sized company to see value with Klaviyo and make sure that they're getting the most out of the solution.
At least. Hey everyone, my name is Carlos Barrero. Ellana, you nailed the pronunciation, so thank you. I'm a peer to Ellana with an E, who just spoke over at Klaviyo as a senior CSM. Our team, think of us as personal trainers, coaches, educators for enterprises using Klaviyo.
I was going to talk and forgot to turn the mute back on. Gosh darn it. All right, so I have a handful of questions that either folks sent in or that I came up with on my own. So I want to make sure that I get to as many questions as possible. If you're just joining us, please do put your questions, if possible, into the Q&A. It's a little bit easier for me to manage, but if you can't access that, the chat is perfectly fine as well. I'm going to go ahead and kick off with a couple of questions, and then I'll be bouncing back and forth between what I see in the chat and what I see in the Q&A. So if I don't get to your question, I will do my best. You don't have to post them in both spots. Just know that I'm working through them as fast as possible. So to start off, I was a part of a Facebook group, and someone was asking specifically to Val Geisler about this question, and I said I would mention it into this call. So this might be a question for any one of you. Totally fine. Also, I would say as we go through, if you want to just unmute yourself and start to contribute, that's fine. If you would rather me call on you, we can do that. But I don't mind if you guys sort of do it more natural. So the question came from David from this Facebook group. Everyone pushes email, our own list, and I have completely 100% behind this, but I have spent 3 years growing ours. I've always taken Klaviyo stats to be correct, but iOS 14 and 15 is changing that. What is the accepted view now? Do I ignore open rates, send to all? I now segment. I know segmenting is powerful, but it will also be more reliable as this update rolls out. Ultimately, it won't affect how I utilize email, but I found the discussion that we were having really valuable because people had conflicting views. So I think the question is really around, what do I do now with iOS 14 with regards to open rates, and who do I send to or who do I not send to for segmenting? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go. Yeah, I think at this point in the game, especially closer as we're getting closer into Black Friday, you're going to be starting to send out more email campaigns. Yes, it's really challenging. It's a bump in the road, but I don't think it should stop people from sending out emails. I definitely also tell my clients, try to avoid sending to all your list, because that will also hurt your deliverability. So if you don't know what deliverability is, it's basically the chances of your email landing in the customer's inbox and not in the spam folder. And so what happens is that a lot of people, they send out, like they end up having, I don't know, 10,000 people on their list, but only like 20% of people actually open. And so when they send out emails to all the people on their list, like Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, they'll see that your brand is sending out emails to people who don't open, regardless of open rate or click rate, So it's gonna make it more likely for you to land in the spam box. So my thing, especially at this point in the game, is I tell my clients to start maintaining a healthy list by cleaning out people who have become unengaged with them based on open rate, place order rate, active on site. I guess a lot of people here are familiar with Klaviyo, so they might have a better idea on what I'm talking about. So, like based on you can do this in your segmentation. So that way, by removing your unengaged subscribers, you're making sure that the people you're sending to are going to be paying more attention to you. And not only that, you'll also be saving some Klaviyo costs. But you'll also be saving some Klaviyo costs, because a lot of people, they don't realize that. I mean, it's kind of awkward saying this, but yes, it's true. Like they don't realize that if they have a 10,000 list, but they're only sending to 2,000 people at a time, that they can actually like save some costs there. So it's really important to keep their deliverability and their list engaged that way. What was the other part of the question? It's about segmenting, right? So yeah, that answers my question. Like I would say update your segments based on not just open and clicks, but also based on whether they're active on site or place an order or even viewed a product. Because the reality is, like, I think the person in the question you mentioned, yes, the person still wants to continue sending email, because I definitely think it's not going to be a lost cause, because the reality is at this point in the game, when you're going to want to reach out your customers, email is the most profitable channel.
So I'm gonna challenge it, because someone else is commenting, and this is sort of my stance too, and I would love to hear if Carlos or Ellana have an opposition on this. But for me, I think Spencer is saying this in the chat too, is that you actually can't use open rate as a reliable source anymore. And so for me, I actually don't track open rate or click-through rate, because I care more about the outcome. I care about the revenue, whatever my goal is. So I'm going to specifically rephrase the question to say, how do you segment, or do you still recommend segmenting and not kind of targeting those unengaged users, as you called them, Chris, because of open rate and click-through rate, when you can't really depend on that? So let's go to Carlos or Ellana, if one of you have an opinion on it.
Yeah, sure. First, I'd agree with Chris 100%. Like continuing to segment for customers that are engaged but by a different definition. I think implicit in your question is or I think for the original question was, this person may be using open rates as like the only dimension, or maybe perhaps the most important, highly prioritized dimension by which they segment their customers. Chris is on the right track here, and generally best practice we recommend in the consulting team at Klaviyo, which is, use other dimensions. Are customers, buying particular products that tend to be more profitable for your company, or are they engaging in different parts of the sites that are likely resemble somebody who's more likely to be engaged? There are other signals you can lean on besides the dimension of the frequency, the recency by which you have engaged with someone's email. One thing I'd like to add to the conversation here too is, beyond just using or beyond the implications of iOS 15 and its impact on segmentation, is also with attribution, one that I think is often overlooked. Of course, if open rates are perhaps going to be unreliable in the very near future, it's gradually shifting as people upgrade to the new version, then the inflated open rates may, of course, be inflating your attribution to some extent. Klaviyo, by default, for those that don't know, uses a last touch or last click or open model. Recently, however, in light of changes here with iOS 15, the product team has released an option where you can now go to clicks only, depending on to what extent your customers are actually using iOS 15. So here to give folks some tactical advice, there's 2 data points I've been recommending customers look at to make the right decision for them, whether you want to move to last click only attribution to click and open. And these 2 data points are the following. One is, try to answer the question, how many of your customers are likely using Apple devices within the platform itself for any recent campaign that reaches the majority of your list, or the largest swath of customers you often reach. In that campaign, take a look at the results after sending, of course. In the advanced report section, there's a table in the middle which breaks out your opens by device. So these are self-reported signals by upstream providers that tell us where exactly a customer is opening from, or where they're likely opening from. They're not always perfect, but look for those that are that evoke or reflect Apple devices. You might see Apple Mail for desktop opens. You might see iPhone or iPad very clearly and explicitly for mobile opens. And those percentages together could give you an insight into, all right, how many of my customers are actually on Apple devices? How many are likely at risk? Now, the second data point is the rate of iOS 15 adoption broadly. So while you may have, let's say, 75% of your customers opening on Apple-related devices and could be impacted by this, how many are actually likely being showing or sending machine opens, I think is what they're being referred to now by Apple's privacy settings. One external data set I think is really helpful, and I'll share this here in the chat with folks, is by a third-party analytics provider. It's a company called Mixpanel, which focuses on mobile app analytics. And one of the pieces of metadata they get is the version of the iOS device that they're on. So the chart here that I linked in the chat looks back a year, but you can also see more recently with iOS 15, like what is the rate of adoption? And just looking at this chart, as of Monday, just 2 days ago, about 28 or 29%, if you round up, of iOS customers that are, or iOS apps that are using Mixpanel analytics are on the new operating system. So about maybe 1 or 3 out of every 10 customers there. So we expect this to gradually increase right over time. People don't always upgrade overnight, but that can help you factor in the decision of, do you want to move to last click attribution only, or keep the default, which is open and click? It comes down to your level of tolerance for uncertainty or inflation in the open rates and its impact on attribution.
And we're spending a ton of time on this topic. This whole topic itself is an entire session, and we did this recently, so I'll make sure to share in the recap email an event that we did 2 months ago that might help a little bit on some of these definitions and why this is a problem for so many people. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on it because this literally could be an entire event on its own. So let's go ahead and move on to another one. With inventory being a major factor going into this holiday season, what and how often do you recommend communication on these delays? How much is too much or not enough?
Yeah, so I had the experience of this when I was managing a big brand for a big company. We had limited inventory for certain collections because shipping from our warehouse didn't arrive on time. And so I think depending on your situation with inventory, especially with the news going on with like, you know, shipment delays and stuff like that, supply shortages and stuff like that. I think it's really important to communicate very openly and honestly and telling people in advance what they can expect from you in terms of shipping cutoff dates. Like if you want to make sure your order gets in on time before Christmas, make sure you place your order by X date. And so you need to do that research with your UPS provider or something to, I don't know what it is in the US, but like you have to do that research to understand those delays and communicate that on your website. I would do that also at the bottom of your footer, especially on your holiday campaigns. Like if there's a shipping cutoff, like put in the bottom of your email footer the dates for making sure you get your order on time. Even a good thing to note is note it on the order confirmation emails that get sent from your Klaviyo for your Shopify. And I would also, if you have like somebody writing a help desk, the auto reply message could mention that so that way if they're asking where's my order, that auto reply can have a reminder of those shipping cutoff dates or delays. I wouldn't put it necessarily maybe on the cart page or the checkout page. Like I don't even think you can do that with Shopify, but like I think it's good to give them a heads up, even maybe at the start of the season. Like now that we're already heading into November, write a letter from yourself as the business owner or the company founder, just saying, hey, heads up, we're going to have limited stock or whatever the situation you have going on, just to give them an explanation about what's going on behind the scenes. So if you want to make sure you get your order in and not have to wait till next year or something, whatever, just give them a heads up. So I think that's a good practice in general.
I agree. I think that's right. It's, perhaps it's not a question of how often should you send about shipping delays, but when or how soon. We've certainly been seeing across clients here at Klaviyo where they're moving up their holiday promotions to get ahead of the holiday rush and the supply chain issues. So plus one, you want to experiment with last day guaranteed delivery type emails or similar.
Yeah, and for brands that can't guarantee delivery by a specific date and that are concerned with fulfillment challenges, I've been hearing about gift cards a lot this holiday season. Offering a gift card is a great last minute opportunity to provide a gift for somebody, give a gift that they can kind of brand as like you get to choose what you want from this brand, but as a great last minute, like guaranteed to deliver by the holidays option.
Let's talk a little bit more about Black Friday, Cyber Monday, because I think that's ultimately where people are heading into right now. So there's a couple questions in here regarding Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So I'm going to sort of condense them if I can, and I may not be super great at it, but we'll try. What should they highlight during their campaign? Should it be like discounts? What can we do to get noticed because everyone's getting flooded with Black Friday sales right now. So what would make it so that they could stand out that maybe is a little bit different or not the common steep discounts that you might see?
Lately, I've been telling my clients to really plan out their email strategy through their segmentation. Like if you have VIPs, your engaged segment, your past holiday Black Friday Q4 buyers, like create your segment so that you can put in place your email strategies early enough and not like do it too last minute, because you also have to start, like Carla said, like early enough and not in the middle of like Cyber weekend, because yes, you're not going to really stand out during that time. And so I really suggest highlighting your top sellers, highlighting your promotion, but also making sure you plan out what promotion will go out to who at what point during the month. Because if you're having like, maybe not call it a Black Friday sale, maybe you want to call it a VIP sale, early access to our VIP buyers before anyone else on the website, Another thing I want to mention is if you're doing that, like having site-wide sales during a long period of time, make sure you update your Klaviyo flows to reflect the same discounts that's on the website. Because the last thing you want is to like someone come on your website, they see, I don't know, 30% off site-wide, and then they get an abandoned cart email with like 10% off. So you just want things to be consistent. So just do a good like check in under the hood to make sure everything is flowing right.
To add a quick thought to that, a general framework we use in a consulting team to help customers, optimize their email program and altogether is, boil it down to like three major variables you can control. One is who you send to, or the segment, when you send to them, just the timing, and then third and finally is what you send, the actual content. To add to what Chris was saying around segments, for the other two variables, like when you land in the inbox, use Klaviyo's smart send time optimization feature. It's a great low-hanging opportunity for a lot of customers. Very low effort, high impact, in that you want to try to maximize the probability that a customer will open a message based on the hour it sends. So our data science team here put together, its own productized methodology of like, how do we experiment with this so that somebody doesn't have to manually chunk out customers hour by hour. We also account for local user time, which is very useful. So that's one recommendation. And the other is, because of the high volume of Black Friday, Cyber Monday emails, I suspect many of the brands here may be competing with each other. So you want to compete for the attention of that customer in the inbox itself. So A/B test and experiment with your subject lines more than anything. That I think could be a great way to, see of whether or not the aggressive discount, financial incentive or the monetary incentive message really stands out or drives clicks, versus maybe something that's more product marketing led, like the general benefits or applications of your product. It's going to be different for every brand. It's of course very circumstantial, but you won't know unless you don't test.
About that subject,
One other, so go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead.
Mine was going to be really quick. I was just going to add personalization. Personalization is a great way to stand out in the inbox. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, it's just to add on to both your points, actually. Like, one of the best subject lines that really stood out to me, I don't know which brand did it. It was a long time ago, many years ago, and I've been using that with my clients, is first name, what would code add to cart give you? And then it would get people actually going to their cart and then clicking on like adding the coupon code add to cart and seeing. And then if they abandon their cart, they get an abandoned cart email. Like, it's really effective in standing out and getting people to take action. Try it out, see what comes out of it.
Well, and I love that part too, because it's not like, you're going to get abandoned carts. So you anticipate that you're going to have a whole bunch of abandoned carts from that, because people are just going to sit here and test it out and see what they get. Mm-hmm. But you're getting attention. So the goal isn't necessarily conversions. The goal is to have eyes on your site, and eventually they get the abandoned cart, they come back, they want to look more. So I think it's a great way of exploring different techniques. And I think that's a really good point that people don't think about, is like, the goal isn't always to convert. Sometimes the goal is awareness, and that's perfectly fine.
And what they'll do is they'll get retargeted. If you're using Facebook or whatever, they'll get retargeted after on Instagram or whatever you're using. So they'll get pixelated that way.
Yeah. Let's see what else we got here. Do you see capturing an email as a secondary goal after sales in the DTC context for paid or organic traffic? Or do you see brands that have a lot of success prioritizing capturing email instead of pushing someone toward the purchase funnel? If it's a primary goal, any particular scenario? So it's kind of what we were just sort of talking about. But
so if you think of it this way, on a good day, you're like, you can say, Ellana, like, on a good day, the best conversion rate you can see on your website is what, 4%. So that means 95% of the people who come visit your website are not going to convert right away. So if you're not capturing their emails, how are you going to follow up with them after they leave your website? So for me, in terms of like organic traffic, I think the primary thing is to capture their emails, because then you can continue that relationship with them in the inbox through cart abandonment or welcome sequence or whatever, to try to get them and nurture them and welcome them into your brand, and then turn into a first-time buyer. That's how I see it. Yeah.
I'd agree with that, and also to contextualize that the 95%, converting to say through a sign-up form that Chris mentioned is a fraction of a much larger cohort, which is the people who land on your website and then bounce away. Something like Google Analytics can give you that. So we're talking about fractions of a fraction of a fraction, and you want to try to get as much. You want to try to earn as many emails as you can to work them through that sales funnel, because it's unlikely customers will buy immediately once away unless they know exactly what they're looking for.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people forget that there's multiple touch points. You're usually you're not trying to convert someone on the first time. You're actually trying to convert them on the fourth or fifth or sixth time. And so when you have people that abandon carts or that show up because they're browsing and they give you the email, which is a great way of having those extra touch points, you're actually helping them to learn more about you from that way. So I think it's really important to make sure that you are trying to find different ways to have those touch points and don't just assume that they're going to come to your site and buy right away. And then when they don't buy, you're upset. It's okay. Most people don't buy the first time they see you.
It's like going to a bar and hitting up a guy, you're like, ask for their number first and then go on a date. Don't bring them up. Well, I mean, depends who you are. That might work for a lot of people. But it's like, you don't want one night stands. You want like loyal customers will come back. So that's always.
Oh, that's a really good point. I think that's something that most people forget. I don't want a one-time purchase. I want reoccurring purchases. Now, sometimes your product doesn't allow that. It really is a one-time purchase. And so that's fine. But like ultimately you want people to come back. That's really what you want. You want those repeat, because those repeat customers are lifelong people. They're going to be the ones that refer you to other friends or family. They're the ones that are your advocate as well. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, and with each engagement on your site with your emails, you're gathering more and more information about that person to further segment, personalize, and be able to create a real authentic relationship with them. So I think that is something that with a longtime customer, you're able to establish a lot more of that kind of like understanding of what they're looking for and who they are to you as a brand.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the cart abandonment, because I think Chris was the one that mentioned it. And this question came in, and I thought it was a really great question. What is the latest on timing between cart abandonment and cart recovery email send? I keep coming across different opinions on that. They're in the apparel industry, women's wear.
I typically send out 2 hours and then 2 to 4 hours after, and then 20 hours after. So like over a day period. Sorry, I'm bad at math today. Yeah, over a 24-hour period, they would get 2 reminders. And then what you can do is after that, what a good thing would do is that you could put them up if they still haven't purchased or converted their cart after that point. You can push them down a discount ladder for certain people who have maybe higher value carts. If you really want them to convert, you can give them an extra incentive. Could be like, I don't know, free shipping, an extra 15% off or something. And I think and that's one thing I think a lot of people don't realize is that they just send out one email reminder and they think that's it. A lot of my clients, what I find when I start working with clients who start with basic flows, they only have one email set up in their flow when it should be a continual over time. Like, don't go crazy there, but like, don't be afraid to add more emails into your flow is what I'm saying. But start with 2 to 4 hours, and then maybe in the Black Friday period when more people are coming, and maybe try to think about how you can reduce some of the time delays between the emails of your flows, I would say.
Yeah, I see David had asked that question in the chat. David, my advice to you, or at least just starting with a comment, is there's a lot of conflicting or different opinions on what is the right number or right number of days within different elements. At least the approach that my consulting team takes here at Klaviyo is, well, the honest answer is we don't know, but let's find out. So what I would suggest A/B testing within a flow. And as a creative way, you can do this with flow logic. The conditional split block has the added feature in a flow where instead of branching based on, well, a condition like, does somebody match this profile property, or did they do or not do this thing? At the very bottom of that drop-down list, when creating the block, there's one called random sample, where you could just break out different paths. So randomly, let's say 50% go this way, 50% go another way, and test 2 very different branches, where down one branch, you might test something where the time delay between emails is, say, 3 to 4 days, or maybe you even test completely different content. I'd recommend testing one variable at a time. But if you're just testing time delays, one branch, say 3 or 4 days, the other branch may be much shorter, could be 3 or 4 hours. And I think the answer is over time, give it, let's say, a few weeks to a month. With the analytics, I think you'll get your answer if it's closer to a longer time frame or a shorter time frame. It's going to be different no matter what business you talk to, but the best way to find out is to experiment.
I like using that conditional split also for my win back flows. So after somebody places an order, it's a good thing to have in place a win back flow that automatically sends them an email to remind them to replenish after a certain number of days, like maybe 30, 60, 90 days. And what you can do is do the same logic and just split. Like what happens if I send out an email, I don't know, 60 days or 90 days, and see what delay brings in the most customers, converts the most customers. So that could be a good thing to try too. So yeah, treat it as an exploration test and learn.
Let's expand a little bit on that, because we're getting a couple of questions in here about like the types of flows or the essential like strategy that people should have. What are the required email segmentations that they should have? So if you can give sort of a high level overview, I guess, of like what are the base things that everyone should be doing in their Klaviyo emails.
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
How much time do we have?
Super broad question.
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, a lot of maybe we could share like a couple things we do. We start early on with customers. One is to start with like just aligning on your goals. Like what are some more quantitative, the better, but what KPIs are you aiming for? For some customers, it's, well, they're leaning into list growth. I want my list to grow at this rate by this time, and put a number on it. You don't have to. It could be aspirational. It could be somewhat realistic based on historical trends. Whatever it is, just put a number on it. Because I think a mistake often a lot of customers make is not setting any goals at all and just saying, well, I want to make more revenue. It's like, well, yes, of course, but from whom, by when, how much, and by what rate? Putting numbers to it, I think, is number one. So start with a goal setting exercise. As for the strategy itself, the basics are making sure you have a clean list. Chris alluded to this earlier, but if you're importing from another platform, making sure that you had consent for those customers, that at least you had some type of signal that suggests these customers are more likely to engage within a certain amount of time. Therefore, I can start with them and not have a complete drop in deliverability health. As for the segments themselves, we talked about like the recency of engagement for like, I think it's like the classic shortcut for a lot of customers of, hey, customers who have opened in the last 7, 14, 30, 90, insert your arbitrary number of days there. It's a great place to start. It's kind of a one size fits all, however. In my opinion, it can be a bit of a suboptimal hack in some cases. So what you'd want to graduate to eventually is, all right, based on my customers who buy X product or Y product or have this demographic makeup, then I can start to tailor my experiences to each one. But start with those engaged segments. That's off the top of my head. Ellana, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with those other things we've talked about before. Active on site, have they viewed a product recently? Things like that can make your engaged segment be a little bit more tailored to people who are truly engaging with your content, not just opening an email and looking at it. From a flows perspective, the flows that we recommend, a welcome series. So welcoming people into your family, telling them what to expect by joining your email program, what your brand is all about, and why they should continue to take steps with you to purchase your products, to share about you on social, things like that. An abandoned cart flow. So abandonment series tend to be high revenue drivers. Win back flows, like Chris mentioned, are great to bring people back into the fold after they make a purchase. And like we talked about, like the brand and what you guys are selling, or what you all are selling, will dictate what that win back flow looks like, how quickly you want to send it. Is it going to be a replenishment flow if it's a skincare product versus if you're selling a vacuum? How soon after that are you going to need to buy a vacuum? So kind of figuring out what that win back and kind of like keeping people active with your brand looks like. Those are kind of like the big three to get started with.
Yeah, and I just wanted someone had asked a question in here about, hey, I'm new to Shopify. People keep telling me to do Shopify email, but then I hear about MailChimp and I hear about Klaviyo, and I don't know what to do. What do I do? And I think everything you just said, Ellana, is exactly why Klaviyo is like the elite email platform for Shopify, because with Shopify email, you can't do a lot of those things. They just don't have that functionality. And so as an email agnostic person, I will answer this question because obviously the folks in this chat are going to say Klaviyo as that answer. But I think really ultimately you have to decide what your goals are with your email. If you're literally just going to send an email and you don't have like, I want to create all these flows or these segmentations or whatever, then you don't need the Mercedes-Benz, right? You can use Shopify. Well, I don't really care for Shopify email, but you could use Shopify email if you really wanted to. But I think, when you're at that stage in your business where creating all of these segmentations and flows makes sense, that's where I would say is time to invest in something like Klaviyo. So I'm inserting myself because I don't really want to ask that question to this group because obviously y'all are going to say Klaviyo. Okay, so sort of along the same lines too, someone had asked how many emails, well, they said per week do you recommend sending to customers, but I'm just going to say how many emails in whatever time frame do you recommend sending? That could be per week, that could be per month, it could be per quarter. So what does that recommendation typically look like for you?
I recommend to my clients to be present in the inbox and show up minimum once a week. Send to your most engaged segment at least once a week. But then if you want to send more, you can do segmented out segments, like for your VIP customers or for high intent shoppers, for example, during the week. But at least once a week, because what tends to happen with clients that I've come across who don't email their list consistently, they maybe wait a month or 2 months. What happens is that they put a ton of content in that one email that they're sending for the quarter or for the month, and it tends to be a convoluted email. And what happens also is because you're not so present in the customer's inbox, they forgot who you are or what you're about, and you'll more likely get unsubscribes from that. That happens to me when a brand hasn't emailed me. I got a brand that I don't even know how they got my email. They sent me like something about their store. I'm like, who is this brand? And I just unsubscribe. So you're wasting your efforts on growing your list by only emailing people once every few months. So that's why I recommend once a week. And if you have the flow set up, like a basic welcome, browse, cart abandonment, you're gonna make sure that the people still get, if you're not a brand who sends a lot of emails, at least have those in place so that you can still engage with your brand, your customers. And even in your post-purchase flow, think about how can you continue that automation, that relationship in the post-purchase automation, so that after they purchase, they still get emails like maybe 30 days down the line talking about something else, and you don't have to think about it, So that's why I like to leverage a lot on the flows. But on the campaign side, at least once a week, I would say.
I think to add to that, I wouldn't give a hard number personally, but I think generally how many emails you should send to your customers is to the extent that your customers will tolerate it, and your deliverability risk is manageable or something that you're willing to stomach. I understand that's not super helpful, but some data points I think that could really help inform this decision for the folks on the phone. Like, how often do you need to send within a certain amount of time? The one big factor I think is your sales cycle. So how long does it take for a customer to, one, just get on your list and then go through to their first purchase? And then what does the delta look like between the first purchase to the second to the third, et cetera? There are some ways to get at this in Klaviyo. One creative hack we use on the consulting team is using flows actually. Instead of actually sending a message out to a person, there's a block called an update profile property action. It's great for like these CRM type use cases where you don't want to send anything out to a customer, but you just kind of want to automatically route or append data to profiles. So when somebody subscribes to the list, not only use that as a trigger for a welcome series, but also update a profile property action where you mark the date that somebody actually did that out. So that will add it to their profile property. The next thing you can do is that when in a different flow, when a customer makes their first purchase, right? So orders one over all time, mark that date as well. And what you can do is export that data in the aggregate, calculate the delta between it. You might need a spreadsheet or something to help you do this. But on average, you should get an interesting answer of, oh, okay, for this segment of customers or this cohort, it takes about, 90 days from sign up to first purchase. So that can help inform your decision. Do I need to send absolutely every day? Probably not. Once a week? Yeah, maybe, or at least once a month if it takes about those 3 months. I work with some brands. I'll take a recent example of a premium denim jean brand. They were a very high volume sender, and I could just tell, kind of reading the tea leaves, that this was sort of increasing their deliverability risk needlessly so, and the performance just really wasn't up to par compared to their peers. So we ran this type of analysis and say, what's the delta or the average days between different orders? And for their brand, premium denim brand, it was about 270 days. And it was really interesting to get everyone's reactions on the line. It's like, hey, I did not think it was actually that long. It was actually much longer than what people anticipated. But that did prove very useful for adjusting their sending cadence to certain cohorts within their audience.
I want to add also onto that is it's better to be consistent and just progress from there. Like if you can only send once every 2 weeks, just start from where you can and then work your way up to once a week or whatever it is, you know? So if you're just starting out, it's true, like sending out one email a week can be quite overwhelming. So just progress, not perfection, I guess.
Yeah, I do that too. My emails, I have email and blog posts that they're identical. So I repurpose my content, but I have found that creating myself a schedule to do it every week meant that I was consistent. That's all I cared about, is I had to be consistent in my process, because I was worried that if I became inconsistent, it was easy for me to stop. And so really, as long as you're consistent with whatever it is that you choose, I have people in my network that do daily emails. I could not do that. Some people do weekly, like myself. Some people do biweekly. It really just is a matter of, I think a lot of what Carlos says, it fits with what your customers need and you're answering their questions. It should be quality information. If you're literally just sending out an email of like, no one's going to care about what you're saying, because people don't actually care about you. They care about the result, right? That's the whole point. They care about the outcome, how your products are going to make their life better. If you're sharing the outcome, then they care. They're going to want to read what you're having to say. But if you're literally just making noise in their box, they're not going to pay attention to it.
Yeah, people don't want to see flyers in their inbox. Like they want to see intentional messages. So that's why I tend to like tell my clients, like, pretty emails don't pay the bills. Like you don't need to hire like an expensive graphic designer to send out an email. Like if you're just a team of one, start by writing out a letter like you're writing out to your best friend, and make it conversational, have a personal tone, and over time you'll familiarize with yourself with your tone of voice, with your founder voice. And what I realized, especially when I was working for big corporate brands, is we never really leveraged that. But when I started working with smaller brands, the way that they write their emails from the voice of the founder, it resonated more with their audience, and that's what converted the most. So as a smaller brand competing with the big brands out there during Black Friday, that's how you're going to stand out, is by putting a bit more intention behind your messages and crafting that copy a bit more, so that people will see that, oh, it's really coming from Ellana, who's gonna update me on what's going on behind her business. I'd like to look forward to that. So
yeah, and I think a lot of people also ask questions about the design of a Klaviyo email versus like a basic text or basic HTML. And by HTML, I don't mean like the whole shebang of the background colors and photos. I literally just mean like you might have a heading that's labeled or something like that. But basically a plain text versus a customized designed email. I'd be curious to hear your all's opinion on which one have you found to be more successful. Do you find that the design-oriented emails become more successful, or is it different depending on the purpose of the email?
The latter. Different depending on the purpose of the email. This, of course, my default is like, well, let's find out if I'm not sure if design-oriented emails really outperform others. I would agree with Chris in principle, which is try not to over-index on the design of the thing itself. The content is really what's substantial. Ellana, you mentioned this as well. It's the results or the value that they're getting from your product. As far as like aesthetics in an email go, some of the things I've seen anecdotally, I don't have hard data around this, but anecdotally, things that tend to work well when performing an A/B test are really just the layout and length of the email, as opposed to like the look and feel, like the colors, the shadows, the graphics, like photography, what have you. Sometimes shorter, simple to follow emails where your call to action is explicit at the very top, or somewhere around the middle, tends to perform better than longer, very long-winded emails. But remember that an email is just is an invitation to go back to your website to continue a purchasing journey or to continue to learn about you and your brand. It is not meant to recreate or redesign some page on your website that you're ultimately linking people to. It's just a short reminder.
Ellana, do you want to add to that? It seemed like you had a thought.
No, I was just going to say, I really love the letter from the founder or something of that sort as a part of a welcome series. If you're using Klaviyo and the like introductory welcome to our brand type series, having that kind of feel good moment, like, ooh, it's the founder reaching out to me, does perform really well.
Yeah. I want to kind of take a step back towards the holiday emails again. For those who don't discount or they're small and they have, the limited ability to provide large discounts, what do you recommend that they could either send in their emails, whether that's cart abandonment or just emails coming up for Black Friday, but like what do you recommend that they could still sort of stand out without discounting? So let's pretend that's off the table.
Yeah.
This question. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Okay, yeah. So I help with my customers like this a lot when they were planning their Black Friday. So a lot of them, they're trying out. Some of them, they don't want to do discounts during a certain period, but they still want to like do something fun and engaging and festive. So some things you can do is free gift with purchase, but with a higher AOV threshold. So that way you're not just giving free shipping everyone. Doing special mystery Christmas boxes or bundles, exclusive bundles for a limited amount of time. That could be good too. Maybe set them at different tiers like $50, $100, $200, depending on whatever you can do. I always like a good 7 days of Christmas where every day you kind of reveal a different offer, or 12 days of Christmas. What was it, 7 or 12? Yeah, 7 days, whatever you can afford to do, whatever you can maintain your capacity is great. And sometimes also, putting in, I think what I've seen some brands do is they suddenly start to have like this VIP, you know how like Amazon Prime, you get free shipping all year. Well, they'll have like an exclusive VIP members club where like, if you want to join our elite status, you can get, I don't know, free shipping all year or like 5%, 10% off all your orders, whatever you can. So that way you can bring people up a notch by paying X amount for like a whole year of free shipping, for example. So it could be like a special promotion like that. It's not discounting, but it's still like a good way to kind of make things exciting during the holidays. One thing that I've actually done in my past career is we added like these special notes in the orders. So it could be like a voucher for coming back next year. So when they open the box to their order, they can see like a special coupon for coming back. So that's good for retention as well. So you're not proactively promoting it. It's more like, well, you could actually, if you want to make it really fun, you can turn it into like a golden ticket type of thing. You know, like, hey, like check your orders out. Like in December, we're going to add in like golden tickets in your orders, in your boxes, and you can check it out and see if you have a golden ticket. And that could be cool to show on stories and social media too. So just some ideas I'm brainstorming.
Chris, I'd agree with those ideas. You mentioned one in particular with like the Amazon Prime example, where there's maybe some type of rewards or loyalty program incentive. That's a great one. And I think among the most popular non-monetary incentives that we see clients use with Klaviyo, we have several third-party partners that support that. Postwell, Loyalty Lion, there's a few others out there in the space that do this. And it usually tend to be a really good add-on. Other non-monetary incentives that can work, non-discounting, like exclusive or early access to certain merchandise, higher priority service with your brand. That's usually something you may not have to give up much for, at least monetarily. And another good one, back to the segmentation conversation, is just personalized products or service experience. So, for example, with apparel brands, like if you're collecting preferences for a customer up front, like what's your style? Are you more casual? Are you more preppy? Are you more this or that? That can personalize the type of content that you get. And it's like, here's like our recommended looks for, XYZ season. And that might be a great way to, say, hey, or to communicate that like, hey, this brand is really looking out for a customer and personalizing that experience so that you don't have to give up margin and a discount.
Yeah. And I just thought of something that I wanted to jump back to when we were talking about plain text versus like designed emails. One thing that I see that people don't do really well is when they do the designed emails is they're forgetting to add alt text to their images. So if you don't know what that is, there's usually a little box that's in there that says alt text or alt tag, depending on which email platform you're using. That is so that one, if a visually impaired user needs to be able to read your emails, they can read it because their screen reader will read it back. But also, if people have turned off the display images on their email, they'll still be able to see content. So you're essentially describing what is in your images. So make sure that you're filling out those alt texts so that if you do end up going the route of the fully designed emails, people can still see what you have to say without having to enable the display images. And when they have those display images as hidden, that usually means that they're preventing you from tracking them. So also keep that in mind as well. But please use alt text in your images, and that goes for your site too.
It's a good tip for a lot of clients. A mistake that I see them do is when they do those nice, pretty graphic emails, they put the coupon code and the promotion embedded in the image, so people don't even see the promo or the coupon code. They can't find the code. So I recommend, if you do decide to do that, or try to avoid doing that, put that in the text block of your email, or at least, like Ellana said, like add the alt text to describe what the promotion with the coupon code is. So if the image doesn't render, they can still see the backup text. So
yeah, exactly. Now we are coming up on our time, and I promised them that I would wrap up right at the hour. So we're going to have maybe 1 or 2 more questions. I will be sharing their contact information in just a minute. So if you have other questions, either for Klaviyo in general, and I'm using Klaviyo because both Carlos and Ellana are Klaviyo, so it's usually best to email Klaviyo directly, or Chris. I will be sharing that in just a minute. But I wanted to circle back for a second to the cart abandonment emails, and someone had asked, just to clarify, for companies using Shopify, they should turn off the Shopify cart abandonment email and only use Klaviyo. Just making sure that Klaviyo would send to people who journeyed after the customer info screen but did not buy, plus did not necessarily subscribe to the brand's email list.
So they need to still be on your list, though. Like, you can't email people out without them being on your list.
Well, I wouldn't. Not necessarily. I'm not a lawyer, preface, so please consult your legal counsel, depending on how you take this. But there is kind of a legal gray area, at least in my experience, with this idea of implicit consent. If Shopify or any other e-commerce platform captures your email address somehow, right? Like, maybe you set up an account with the store, or I don't know, you're able to get your hands on an email address from a customer. It's technically fair game to send to. However, you want to be careful to, of course, include some type of mechanism to unsubscribe for emails. That is just required. So a shorter way of saying this is, like, there's a higher risk to not providing a way to unsubscribe from emails as opposed to gaining explicit consent. That said, explicit consent is, of course, a marketing best practice. However, you don't always need that explicit marketing consent to send something like an abandoned cart email. Otherwise, your abandoned cart traffic may drop down quite a bit. So again, some risk there, but I just wanted to make that clear, where it's not mandatory, recommended, but not mandatory.
Yeah, I think I agree. As long as basically, a cart abandoned email means that you have their email somehow. So they have given it to you. There's a difference between a cart abandonment and a browse abandonment. And I know that what's that?
They're considered transactional emails. I did
exactly
back in a few months ago, and they are considered transactional emails. Obviously, check your legal, but yes, they are considered transactional.
Yeah. And so for me, I frown personally on browse abandonment. That might just be me as a privacy issue that I have. I know a lot of people like it and they think very highly of it, but stick with cart abandonment, please, because it freaks me out otherwise. But yeah, I wanted to echo that really quickly. So the last thing that I wanted to comment on, or as we kind of part ways, I have your contact information up here for folks, but as we kind of wrap up, could you share just a couple of examples of companies that you think do email really, really well?
I just put it in the chat. I really like the emails coming from Truvani. Subscribe to their list. I don't personally know them. I just happen to be on their list. And every time they send out an email, it's not one of those like graphic emails. It's just plain text, but they have really compelling images and really compelling copy. So check them out. And just use that as an inspiration for how you can try to approach your emails. It's very different from what you see other big brands do.
I really like Drunk Elephant's emails. Drunk Elephant does a great job of kind of keeping things short, sweet, simple, eye-catching subject lines. And then the other one that I love is Primal Kitchen.
I like Death Wish Coffee. They got like a really interesting, unique brand voice. Their emails are kind of witty and funny, and it really kind of evokes their brand personality unapologetically, which I love.
I love it. Those are great examples. So now you all need to go follow those examples so that you can see what they do really, really well and try to implement that if it's appropriate for yours. Don't just copy people. Make sure that it's appropriate for you. So let's wrap up. I want to say thank you so much to Chris, Carlos, and Ellana for being here. This was fantastic. I know that we had a ton of questions that did not get answered. So I recommend that you either reach out to Chris or to Klaviyo as a whole, because Carlos and Ellana have a whole team at Klaviyo that can help support you if you have questions. There was a lot of questions in the chat about I need help to do XYZ. Contact Klaviyo for the technical side of things. I'm going to assume that's what you want, Chris. But like if you have questions like the technical side of Klaviyo, the easiest thing to do is to contact them directly. That's what they're there for. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for hanging out. I will be sending a recap email later today or tomorrow with the recording and feedback. So please share because I would love to hear your thoughts. And I hope you all have a lovely day or afternoon or evening, depending on where you're listening from.